Hello, I'm Aaron Pringle, and welcome to my channel. Today we'll be diving deep into a movie about mystery, murder, and misogyny. A man who has a problem with two of those things, the femme fatale who drives him crazy, the cocktail that defines her personality, and at the end, if we have time, a queer reading for funsies. All this here on a loosely defined series exploring cocktails on film that I like to call
It's Cinemixology. Ooh.
Today's film is 1947's Dead Reckoning, starring Humphrey Bogart as Rip Murdoch, a paratrooper returning home from World War II, and Elizabeth Scott as Coral Chandler, a femme fatale who is not to be trusted, for she is womanfolk. There are other characters, but they don't do much except die. Dead Reckoning, as a whole, is a pretty empty shell of a film, with a bare bones plot that seems designed mostly to give Humphrey Bogart as many lines as possible. There's only room for a handful of characters in this old school film noir, and they have to get their words out fast, lest Humphrey Bogart start speaking his next monologue over their precious few lines. The only female character, Coral, is a beautiful, mysterious psychopath who is bad at grammar and loves herself a Ramos Gin Fizz cocktail. But how does that somewhat obscure cocktail provide depth and insight into her character? Oh, we'll get there. But first... Okay, the plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's your standard issue noir film, and theoretically a murder mystery, I think. I'm not sure. But there's really only two possible suspects and 5 characters total. There's twists and turns, to be sure, but with each one you'll be asking yourself, huh? And okay, sure. The film starts right in the middle of the action, with Rip being chased by someone and running into a church so he can tell his story to a priest, so that the truth of his twisted tale will be told even if everyone involved dies. This triggers an hour-long flashback that takes up the vast majority of the film. You see Rip and his best wartime bud / fellow paratrooper dear sweet Johnny Drake are returning home from World War II when sweet soft lips Johnny suddenly runs off when he finds out he is due to receive a Medal of Honor. Rip then spends the entire rest of the film acting like a private detective, even though his repeated backstory is that he owns a taxi cab company.
How would I know? I just run a fleet of taxi cabs.
But anyway, Rip deduces that Johnny runs off because he has a secret identity and doesn't want his picture in the newspapers. Bogart immediately drops everything to go search for his special friend. Okay, there's not really a whole lot of homoerotic text in this film, or is there? No, not yet. We'll get there. Anyway, Rip was able to track down sweet yummy Johnny to Gulf City, somewhere in the southern United States, where he sort of looks around for Johnny, but mostly hangs out in his hotel room, throwing baseballs at the furniture, and delivering flowery monologues with lines such as, What to do in the hot wind, smelling of jasmine, except wait and sweat, and prime the body to sweat more. That kind of thing. He eventually finds Johnny in the morgue, where he's been hiding out as a desk clerk. I'm kidding, he's very dead.
It was like a lump of charcoal.
After some more light sleuthing, Rip quickly discovers that Johnny was an English tutor for the sultry Coral and had an affair with her, and was found guilty of shooting her very rich, very old husband to death. So he ran away to World War II, as was the style of the time. Then, in the short time between when Johnny returned home and Rip caught up to him, he somehow ended up as Johnny Flambe.
Like a lump of charcoal.
So our mystery up to this point is who killed Coral's rich old husband, and how did sweet, innocent old Johnny get involved with all this ne'er-do-wellery? Because we simply cannot believe sweet vibes Johnny can be guilty of such a crime. Plus, he's dead. So, Anyway, Rip eventually finds himself at a cocktail lounge / nightclub / secret mob casino looking for the harlot who got dear sweet Johnny into so much trouble. Rip's attitude in this film is problematic, but we'll get to that. He meets Louis the bartender, who in the tradition of extremely helpful cinematic bartenders, not only has all the answers to Rip's questions, he also has a letter that presumably explains everything. All he needs to do is survive long enough to get all of his helpful information to Rip, and the mystery will be solved in no time. Anyway, the fruitful conversation with Louis the bartender is cut short by the arrival of our leading lady, Coral, sidling up to the bar next to Rip and ordering her signature cocktail, and defining character trait, the Ramos Gin Fizz, a cocktail known for being as delicious as it is incredibly complicated to make. Rip takes one look at Coral and immediately decides that he hates everything about her.
I hated every part of her.
We then learn that since her English tutor / lover was convicted of putting a bullet into her husband's skull, Coral has been hanging out at this club owned by legitimate business owner Martinelli, just hanging out, playing roulette, and occasionally singing. And this leads to one of my favorite parts of the film, when Coral is pressured into singing a song. She's sitting at a table trying to pry information about Dear Sweet Johnny from Rip when the owner forces her to sing a song. But does she walk up to the stage? Perhaps get behind a microphone? Or at least stand up for the breath support if nothing else? Nope. She literally just takes a breath and starts singing straight into Bogart's face without moving an inch. And apparently singing a burning torch number in a husky voice is all it takes for Rip to fall in love, which, relatable. Te amo, Bernadette. Now, legitimate business owner Martinelli doesn't like Bogart in his club asking questions about what happened to Johnny for entirely unsuspicious reasons. So legitimate business owner Martinelli takes Rip and Coral to his private legitimate business office and serves up a round of roofie coladas. Rip drinks his roofie colada and loses consciousness, eventually waking up to find himself in a situation all too familiar to spring breakers all over Florida, coming to from a drug-induced haze in bed with a dead bartender. No judgments here. Happened to me twice. So now we have all the pieces to the puzzle. A mobster, legitimate businessman, a not entirely trustworthy dame, dead bodies, and a letter that will hopefully explain just what the hell is all going on exactly. Unfortunately, we still have an hour of the movie left, and not a whole lot of actual mystery left. And this is when we start to run into some real pacing issues in this film. The action will literally stop dead, so Rip and Coral can go for a drive to the suburbs to see a locksmith, who also sells stolen Nazi fighter grenades. Rip might just take a nap for 2 days straight.
Sleeping like that for 36 hours?
And tell an increasingly bored priest this whole story. Remember, this whole movie is Rip delivering purple monologues to a priest who I imagine has to be getting so bored. The priest is going left to have a snack at some point. Anyway, at some point, Carol and Rip are on one of their car adventures, and she expresses how she just can't seem to feel much in life. And she just keeps bouncing from man to man, searching for something that'll light her fire.
What happens, Rip, when it never comes the way you want it? Like music that never reaches a pitch. What do? Go on singing songs and drinking Ramos Gin Fizzes?
But Rip responds to that with...
The trouble with women is they ask too many questions. They should spend all their time just being beautiful. Women ought to come capsule-sized, about 4 inches high. When a man goes out of an evening, he just puts her in his pocket and takes her along with him, and that way he knows exactly where she is. He gets to his favorite restaurant, he puts her on the table and lets her run around him on the coffee cups while he swaps a few lies with his pal, without danger of interruption. And when there comes that time in the evening when he wants her full-sized and beautiful, just waves his hand, and there she is, full-sized.
Why, that's...
But if she starts to interrupt, he just shrinks her back to pocket size and puts her away.
Sorry, it suddenly felt like having an almond. Not that got everywhere. It's all very problematic, and I'm still not sure if Coral's buying any of this crap.
What you're saying is, women are made to be loved.
Is that what I'm saying?
And I think it's supposed to be implied that maybe they fall in love during this time, and maybe Coral really is innocent in all of this, and she was just, being held hostage by a mean mobster, legitimate businessman, maybe. I feel like I have almond in my beard. So, look, obviously this monologue is very misogynistic, and I will be ripping it apart at some point, but let's take a break from this for now and have a cocktail. That was a longer break than I was expecting. It's a completely different day. So let's make a cocktail. Okay. So to make a Ramos Gin Fizz, like the kind that Coral drinks all the time apparently. So into your shaker cup, you will need 3/4 of an ounce of simple syrup, which is just a fancy word for sugar water, a 1/2 ounce of freshly squeezed lemon juice, 1/2 ounce of freshly squeezed lime juice, 3/4 ounce heavy cream, 2 ounces of gin. I'll be using Rayhorst, local company. A dash of orange flower water, and a raw egg white. And to that, we're going to add 3 ice cubes. By the way, I'm loving this Onyx cocktail shaker, but if you get one, it came with a cocktail guide. Just throw that away. Make sure you have a tight seal on that and shake the shit out of it. I am out of shape. And shake it again. Alright, then add just a splash of seltzer for now. There you go. So good. To finish it off, just a little piece of orange zest. And there you go. Now, if you made it right, you should have this thick, fragrant foam on top. So obviously the cocktail's a bitch and a half to make, but it is delicious. The texture itself is pretty hard to describe. Like, foam on top has this meringue-like quality to it. It's kind of like a sweetened whipped cream almost. And actually, as it rests, you can put more seltzer. The drink itself kind of tastes like an orange dreamsicle. And it is delicious, but obviously it's not too common these days. It was really popular right around the turn of the 20th century. You don't see them too often in bars anymore. There aren't a lot of bars that are going to have the ingredients needed to make them. And raw egg white cocktails, I think, are illegal to serve to people in most states. Not entirely sure, but for a lot of reasons it fell out of favor. But it is a very unique experience that if you do find a place that makes them properly, you should absolutely try it. So now that we know a little more about the cocktail that Coral's always drinking, let's go back to the movie and see what that cocktail suggests about her. Can you tell where I might go with this? This cocktail that has milk and eggs in it.
You must believe me, Rip. It was exactly like I told you.
Back to the movie. Where was I? Oh, right. I do like that this bit also gives me almond snacks. So let's talk about that monologue. It was misogyny, pure and simple. His main problem with women is he can't treat them like literal possessions and control their every move. Women should always be treated as accessories to him, toys or appliances. But it's not because he's misogynist, it's for their own safety. They just can't be trusted to be by themselves. They need to live in a man's pocket. Obviously, it's not just that monologue that's problematic with this movie. It was made at a different time, but it's not just the monologue by itself that's problematic. Coral's entire character is based on her being emblematic of all of womanhood. Look at the signature cocktail that the film gives her. It has egg, it's milk, flower water, all are traditional symbols of women and feminine fertility. By giving her this cocktail, the movie is basically hanging a neon sign above her, flashing, "Woman! Woman!" What remains unclear as the mystery continues to unravel in the film, though, is not that Coral represents femininity, and Rip thinks that she should be controlled. As the film meanders on, Coral and Rip just kind of putter along and scheme to get various MacGuffins. At first, the MacGuffin is the letter from Johnny that the bartender had, but then they're both dead, so it doesn't matter. The second is a gun that Martinelli is using to blackmail Coral.
Martinelli won't ever give up that gun, and this time you might be killed.
That'd be awful, wouldn't it?
Please, Rip, don't start being suspicious again. I told you.
So it's at this point that I'm going to spoil one of the revelations at the end of the film. At the very end of the movie, Martinelli tells Rip that he's been married to Coral the whole time, and that the only reason she was ever married to the old rich guy was to get his money, because they thought he was going to die soon.
Then after the marriage, I found out from the doctor that the old man might live to be 80.
Which, okay. But since now you know that it's coming, the rest of the movie makes little sense. You see, the whole time, all the complications that happen, you realize are just Coral needlessly spinning a web of lies.
There's something I didn't even tell the coroner because Johnny wouldn't let me. I was right there when it happened. Johnny was afraid they'd somehow blame me, tie us both up with it. You know how they do. They murder her husband. But that wasn't the way it was. Stuart had always been crazy jealous. That night he was drunk, too. And then suddenly, Johnny came into the room. He took the gun away from Stuart. I was trying to. I don't know what happened, but it seemed to go off right in my ear. I passed out, and when I came to, Johnny was kissing me. That was the last time I saw him until he came back. You don't believe me, do you? Yes. He found it easy to believe.
You killed him. Why lie?
Because you must believe me, Rip. It was exactly like I told you.
Except for a few changes.
The struggle with the gun, the only difference.
It was in your hands, not Johnny's, when it went off.
Yes. I'm tired. I can't go on anymore. I wanted to tell the police that it wasn't murder, that I did it. But I was afraid of what they'd do to me because I hadn't said so before. I live by the train tracks. I don't know if it makes sense or if this makes sense. I love you. I was a car hop in Texas.
Since the rest of the movie is very boring once you know it's all just a bunch of Coral lying, I am now going to skip to the final scene, where Rip has decided to confront Martinelli and get the missing murder weapon so he can clear Johnny's name.
While Coral waits outside in the car, Rip confronts Martinelli. During this confrontation, he lobs a few fire grenades, which the last remaining living side character takes as his cue to exit the film in grand fashion. And then we get one last confession from a panicked Martinelli. That is when he reveals that he has been married to Coral the whole time, that her getting married to the rich old guy had been a ruse in the first place.
Did she tell you she was a car hop once in Texas?
But then he also tells Rip who actually killed the rich old husband. So the real story is, Coral and Martinelli had been married in Detroit.
She came from the slums of Detroit.
They had worked their way down to the city where this takes place in, and found a rich old guy that she then married, thinking that he would die very soon from disease. However, they found out he wasn't going to die soon, and so Coral was just kind of stuck in this marriage. The rich old guy hired a tutor, dear sweet, sweet Johnny. Johnny tutored her in grammar, and this naturally led to them becoming lovers. Johnny and the rich old man did have a fight, there was a confrontation, but apparently, and again, this is the real story, Martinelli says he heard the scuffle from outside the house. He just happened to be walking by the window, heard the fight, and then
That was all I needed. I followed the old man home and shot him.
Johnny, for some reason,
The Preston kid thought she did it. Took the rap.
and ran off to World War II, as was the style at the time. So, if you were keeping track of all that, that meant this whole thing happened because Coral wanted the rich old man that she was married to die so that she could have his money and presumably be free. I don't know.
And so she weaved this giant web of lies to get here. And I'm just like, girl, old people are fragile. There are a million ways to kill an old man, especially if you're married to him. This is all unnecessary. Coral, you're acting crazy. So anyway, very end of the movie happens. So Martinelli gives that entire backstory out. Rip pushes Martinelli out the front door, only for Martinelli to be immediately shot dead by Coral. Rip recovers from this, and then him and Coral start to dry off. And it's at this point that Rip decides to confront the armed and recently murderous Coral, who we just learned has been lying to him this entire time. She begs him to forgive and forget.
Rip, can't we put this behind us?
But he can't do it, because he knows that one day she'll turn on him, because he can't put her in his pocket. But they're in a standoff, as he is controlling the car, and she has a gun on him. If she shoots him, the car will crash. If he stops the car, she'll shoot him. How will this end? Keeping in mind that at the time the movie was made, cars were basically death traps with no airbags or seatbelts or any of the modern safety features. So she decides to shoot him. They crash. Rip sustains some minor injuries, including the bullet wound, while Coral is significantly less uninjured. She confesses she wished she had lived in Rip's pocket after all, and then dies.
I wish you could put me in your pocket now.
Geronimo, Mike.
Fiend. Okay, so I have to say, I'm very confused. But like, if Coral was lying and scheming the whole time, her actions don't make sense. Like, why did she confess to the murder? Like, Martinelli killed him. Why did she ever confess to the original murder? And why did she make Johnny take the blame to the original murder if her, like, abusive ex-husband was the one who had killed him in the first place? And again, it's not hard to kill an old person. Like, she could have just said Martinelli was behind it from the very beginning and gotten away with all of it. Your abusive ex-husband who's been skirting the law actually killed your current husband. Like, take the opportunity and run, girl. Like, my first pass at trying to analyze this movie, I actually had a hard time figuring out why the movie went to such great lengths to set up Coral as, like, representative of all of womanhood, only to give her such a limp set of motivations. Like, she was just sort of lying to lie. But then eventually I realized that is the point. In doing some research for this film, I found the book Femmes Fatales by Marianne Doane. Her analysis of Femmes Fatale and film noir of this time period helped give me the framing to understand the problem of Coral. Doane writes of the Femme Fatale, her power... I don't know why I'm doing a voice. Let me try again. Her power is of a peculiar sort, insofar as it is usually not subject to her conscious will, hence appearing to blur the opposition between passivity and activity. She is an ambivalent figure because she is not the subject of power, but its carrier. If the femme fatale overrepresents the body, it is because she is attributed a body, which is itself given agency independently of consciousness. In a sense, she is a power despite herself. Coral's actions don't make any sense because they're nonsensical. She has a power over men, but she is not in control of it. Because of this, her powers of seduction and deception are not put into use to achieve a specific goal. She just deceives and seduces because it is her nature. She is but woman, after all. So the movie as a whole becomes immoral. Coral should have allowed herself to become property and under the control of a stable man force. That way, her feminine wiles wouldn't have gotten her and a bunch of other people killed. And it's all cemented by that "I want to put you in my pocket" speech that Humphrey gives. Without it, we might have been able to get a different reading from this movie, but with it, like, subtext becomes text. Coral should have allowed herself to be in a pocket, and she wouldn't have ended up, dead. The thing is, though, that "I want to put you in my pocket" monologue was not part of the original script. The director added it after Bogart got drunk one day and went on a similar rant about women, just sharing his feelings.
That bizarre and alarmingly chauvinistic dialogue about women coming capsule-sized and fitting in a man's pocket, that was all Bogart. This whole passage was something the actor was known to espouse when he was a few sheets to the wind. I guess he decided it was time to immortalize it on film.
The problem is not with Coral at all. It's the writers, directors, and male co-stars that are controlling her character. The contemporary reviews weren't exactly glowing for this movie, but it seemed to be considered a passable movie,
and some people liked it a lot. They weren't really bothered by Coral's actions not making sense because they were already primed as an audience not to view her character as a woman with agency, and as such, the question they ask while they watch the movie is not why she will lie and deceive, it's just how she will lie and deceive. The only question is, how much is that lying harlot lying? The contemporary views also singled out Lisbeth Scott, playing Coral, as seeming stiff and wooden. Now I think this is unfair. Scott does play Coral as if every word and action takes tremendous effort, except for brief moments when she needs to convince someone she's experiencing an emotion, and then she just comes alive. I think she might have played Coral as being self-aware that she was just a device, without agency or control. Every action and word is a struggle because she is just a puppet being forced to dance. And even if that wasn't the intention, I'd probably give an uneven performance too if my co-star was a drunk guy who walked around ranting about how much he wanted to treat me as a literal object and keep me in his pocket.
Back in those days, actresses were actually part of the props budget. I had to sit on a little table next to a piece of masking tape that said woman.
Now, I know this movie was made in a different time, and you're going to run these kinds of landmines when consuming outdated media. And the point of this video isn't to explore how 1940s society was bad. My goal was to analyze the film in terms of its cocktail, but the misogyny was so baked into the very fabric of the movie and how the cocktail was used, it's the only direction I could take this film in. I mean, if I had wanted to rant on how this movie from the 1940s was problematic, there would have been a lot to work with. And not just in how it treats women, but also because of how this movie treats the black character in the film. Hyacinth, the only other female character in the movie, is Coral's maid, or maybe the maid of the hotel she's staying in. It's never made super clear. But she does act in a servant role throughout the film. In one scene near the end, Coral and Rip give Hyacinth a gun and tell her to keep watching a cop they took hostage, but not to worry because...
Don't worry, Mabel. No one will do anything to you.
I never worried since my first husband.
The implication is that the black woman won't get in trouble for taking a cop hostage at gunpoint because her white people told her to. I mean, that scene alone would be a lot to unpack about why it's problematic. But no. I wanted to analyze the movie on its own terms, and these are the terms it gave me, that women suck and can't do anything on their own. Like and subscribe. Okay, that's a little bit of a bummer to end the video on. If there was another way to read this film that wasn't just pure misogyny, something perhaps a little more queer, obviously I'm going to talk about that reading of the film. But I should say that the misogyny is the point, and that does suck. And I'm stretching for this queer reading. But it is there if you look for it on the edges, which is where I find most of my queerness. So let's just do a quick queer reading with my wet claw. Assuming it was possible to remove the anti-women stuff, how can we see a queer reading through this film? The first hint is that the film noir genre tends to treat femme fatales as only one half of the equation. Noir films tend to have a massive Madonna horror complex. Not this Madonna, but this Madonna. This Madonna horror complex was especially big after World War II, and especially in film noir. And it's not hard to explain why. After World War II was ending, women that had taken over the jobs that men had left suddenly found themselves having their options for a career limited. And there was a huge tension for gender roles at the time, which played out in the time's films. And they tend to place women on either end of an extreme spectrum, the Madonna whore spectrum. They are either the saintly bastion of all that is holy or good, or evil, duplicitous slut, and nothing in between. Coral is obviously presented as the latter. But we're missing the other half of the equation in this film. Where is our Madonna? Where is our saintly, goodly figure?
Come on, hero. How could Johnny possibly be a murderer? Why should anybody kill Johnny?
He was the nicest person I'd ever met.
I knew him like my own birthmark.
Then your Johnny will be cleared. You don't care what happens to me. Don't you love me?
I loved him more.
In this interpretation, Coral is still representing womanhood, but in a way that is specific to Rip. She is not all women, but rather a symbol of an internal struggle within Rip. He is coming to terms with an inner queerness that is rejecting hetero-romantic love. While Rip himself is probably bisexual, Sex seems to mean little to him. In the very beginning, he's dismissive of sex,
Didn't I tell you all females are the same with their faces washed?
but he harbors strong romantic feelings for Johnny.
Well, let's just say I remember Johnny.
Him losing Johnny causes an inner crisis that sees him flirting with the idea of taking the society-approved path of the hetero lifestyle and being seduced by feminine, heterosexual love. His rejection and mistrust of Coral then becomes not necessarily misogyny, but his own conflicting emotions about what he wants in love.
I loved him more.
Her death, therefore, is not punishment, but resolution of his inner conflict. He knows now he is choosing a homoromantic path. Again, to be clear, the right analysis of this film is that Coral represents men's fear and distrust of women, and any power that they have that can't be controlled. The queer reading is fun, but it can't really be sustained without ignoring huge chunks of the text. Anyway, thanks for watching my first video. Hopefully they all won't be this long, but this one kinda got away from me, and I had a lot to say. If you have any suggestions for movies or TV shows that you think could use the Cinemixology treatment, please let me know in the comments down below. Oh, and actually subscribe and like, please. Goodbye.
I was a car hop in Texas.
Did she tell you she was a car hop once in Texas?